The year is 718 AD, and the fate of the Iberian Peninsula hangs in the balance. One small kingdom defies an empire. The sun rises slowly over the Iberian Peninsula, casting a pale light across a land that no longer belongs to its ancient rulers. What was once the proud Visigothic kingdom now lies shattered, broken, and scattered like dust, carried by the restless wind. The year is 718 AD, a time when fear moves faster than armies, a time when cities fall before their bells can finish ringing, a time when kingdoms die in silence. Only the sound of hooves and steel remains in the south and center. Banners of the Umayyad armies stretch across the land like a tide that refuses to stop. Tariq ibn Ziyad had crossed the strait with a force that shocked the world. His soldiers, swift, precise, and disciplined, broke through the heart of the Visigoths at Guadalete. The memory of that battle still haunts the survivors. It was not only a defeat, it was the end of an age, the end of a world carved by centuries of faith, kingdoms, and fragile unity. After Guadalete, the Visigothic ranks collapsed. Cities that once stood proudly under their own crowns fell one by one. Toledo, the ancient capital, could not resist. Its gates opened not with courage, but with despair. Nobles fled in the night, priests hid sacred objects, families abandoned stone homes built by their ancestors. Smoke choked the sky as entire districts burned, and the ruling class that once believed itself unshakable now scattered like birds before storm. Wherever the Umayyad armies marched, the sound of steel echoed through valleys and plains. Their cavalry moved with the precision of a single mind. Their banners carried the weight of an empire, confident, unbroken, unstoppable. But the more powerful the conqueror appears, the more sharply history remembers the few who refused to kneel. As the Muslim armies advanced deeper into the peninsula, a different movement began in the north. Not an army, not a kingdom, just survivors, men, women, children, warriors, priests, broken nobles, wounded soldiers, and simple farmers who refused to surrender their homes. They fled not towards safety, but into the jaws of nature itself, towards mountains that seemed more like colossal walls, raised by the earth to challenge the sky. Towards Asturias, the Asturias mountains spread like an ancient fortress, built not by men, but by time. Their peaks rise steep and unforgiving. Their forests thick, silent, and full of shadows. Rain falls hard here, winds scream across the ridges, paths twist like serpents through sharp rocks and endless slopes. This land accepts only the strong, yet it protects them too, for invaders fear terrain they cannot control. Roads vanish, valleys trap, cliffs hide dangers. In these mountains the earth becomes a weapon. It is here that the remaining Visigothic survivors sought refuge, not because it was easy, but because it was nearly impossible for the enemy to follow. The high trails turned to mud with every rain, the forest swallowed footprint. Visibility reduced to mere steps. This land belonged to the mountains themselves, and no army born in southern heat could hope to tame them. Among the survivors was a man whose name would echo through centuries, Pelagius, a noble of uncertain origin, a soldier familiar with defeat, a man who lost nearly everything except his will. Some say he fled because his family was taken. Some say he rebelled because the new rulers placed crushing burdens on the people. Some say he simply refused to live under foreign rule. Whatever the truth, the mountains accepted him, and he accepted the mountains. Pelagius watched the scattered survivors climb the ridges with bleeding feet and tired hearts. He watched mothers carry infants wrapped in cloth soaked from rain. He watched old men struggle to keep up leaning on sticks. He watched warriors walk in silence, ashamed of the kingdom they lost. But in this suffering, he saw something powerful, not defeat, not hopelessness. He saw potential. He saw the spark of a people who might rise again, if someone dared to lead them in the ruins of a small mountain village. He gathered them not with speeches, not with promises, just with presence. A leader stands not by words, but by the decision to stand when others collapse around him. The survivors formed a circle, their faces lit by flickering torchlight. They listened as he spoke softly of land, honor, survival, and the weight of a kingdom lost. He asked them only one thing: will you fight for a future your children will never see? Unless you begin here. Some hesitated, some doubted, but none walked away, because in this place, far from the collapsing world below, these mountains were the last piece of land they could still call home. Day after day, Pelagius walked through forests and cliffs, studying every path, every ridge, every choke point. He knew that a small force could defeat a large one if the ground fought beside them. He knew that the enemy would one day come. He knew they had only one chance. While the Umayyad rule expanded across the peninsula, Cordoba rose as a new center of power. Governors appointed by the emir reorganized the land taxes, collected soldiers, quartered mosques, built new laws, enforced. The new rulers believed their control complete. They believed resistance ended. They believed the mountains held nothing but a few scattered rebels too weak to matter. But history does not bend to the plans of powerful, it bends to the will of the persistent. Reports reached Cordoba of a rebel leader refusing to submit, a man named Pelagius. A band of survivors living in hidden valleys, a rising threat, small but irritating, a spark that might become fire. And so the commanders decided to extinguish it. Alcoma, a trusted and experienced military leader, was ordered to march north. He gathered troops accustomed to victory and confident in the might of their empire. They marched into terrain they did not understand, into narrow paths where trees grew thicker than walls, into slopes where one wrong step meant death, into shadows where the enemy saw everything but they saw nothing. The mountains waited. Pelagius waited. History waited. The Umayyad army marched north with the confidence of men who believed the mountains were nothing more than obstacles that could be crushed with numbers and steel. Alcoma had led his troops through valleys and across rivers. They had crossed forests and plains. They had followed ancient Roman roads, now overgrown with grass and weeds. The soldiers spoke little. Their horses snorted clouds of mist into the cold morning ere their armor clinked as they moved in formation. They had not expected resistance in this forgotten land. While Pelagius and his followers had prepared for this moment for months, they had observed the enemy, they had mapped the trails, they had studied the streams and the ridges. They knew that courage alone would not win the day. The mountains themselves would fight with them if used correctly. The rebels constructed small barricades from fallen trees. They positioned themselves along narrow passes where the enemy could not bring their full numbers to bear. Every rock, every slope, every bend in the trail was an advantage. Every path was a trap. Morning mist hung low over the mountains. Visibility was poor. The Umayyad cavalry could see only a few steps ahead. Their pride made them push forward despite the warnings. Alcoma sent scouts. They returned with tales of nothing but fog and silence. Confidence remained unshaken. The enemy underestimated the northern lands and the resolve of those who refused to submit. Pelagius and his men waited silently. They could hear the distant sound of hoof beats, the occasional clang of armor, the rhythm of the march carried on the wind. Each moment was stretched, each breath measured. And then the first volley began. Arrows rained down from the ridges, rocks tumbled from cliffs, crushing men and horses. The Umayyad columns were funneled into a narrow gorge. They could not advance or retreat easily. Panic began to spread as their formations were broken. Pelagius had positioned his warriors to strike at flanks. They emerged from hidden trails, hitting enemy units with precision. Chaos spread through the ranks. Soldiers fell one after another. Cavalry trampled infantry. In confusion, the mountains themselves seemed to shake with the fury of the ambush. Alcoma tried to rally his men. He shouted commands, tried to organize counterattacks, but the terrain made it impossible. Horses slipped on wet rocks. Foot soldiers were caught in the narrow pass. Each step forward brought them closer to death. The rebels moved with the confidence of men fighting for every breath of their homeland. Every arrow, every stone, every swing of a sword was aimed to kill or scatter. Alcoma realized the mountain had become an ally of Pelagius. The pride of the conqueror began to crumble. Hours passed. The battle waged in the shadows of cliffs and forests. The mist mingled with dust and the smoke of small fires set by the rebels. Visibility became almost zero. The Umayyad soldiers could hear but could not see. They could feel the danger, but could not escape it. Some tried to break through the narrow paths, only to find themselves trapped in enclosures of rock and thorn. The cries of the wounded echoed through the valleys. The mountain seemed alive with the screams of the defeated and the defiance of the defenders. At the height of the battle, Pelagius led a sudden attack on the rearguard of the enemy column. The strike was precise, swift, and devastating. Alcoma was injured in the chaos. His command faltered. The Umayyad army began to collapse from within. Panic spread faster than any missile. Soldiers attempted retreat only to stumble into more ambushes. By evening, the mountain had claimed its victory. The survivors of the Umayyad army fled through the rugged terrain. Some fell to the rocks, some drowned in icy streams, some were captured by the rebels. The victory at Covadonga was more than a battle, it was the spark that lit the fire of resistance. Pelagius and his men had carved out a small kingdom in the mountains, a place from which they could challenge the mightiest empire of the age. The news spread slowly at first. Stories of a mountain refuge where men defeated an army circulated among fleeing survivors and scattered communities. Whispers turned into tales, tales into legends, and legends into hope. In the years that followed, Pelagius consolidated his rule. He fortified positions in the mountains. He sent small raiding parties into surrounding areas. He gathered allies among Visigothic nobles and local leaders. Each raid was a message to the Umayyad rulers. The north would not be conquered easily. He married his daughter Ermesinda to strengthen alliances. He governed not only with courage, but with knowledge that the survival of his people depended on discipline and foresight. Every day was a lesson in warfare strategy, politics, and survival. After Pelagius' death, his son Favilla succeeded him. Favilla's reign was brief. He died young. The mantle passed to Alfonso. Alfonso would expand the kingdom. Further south, he conducted raids into Muslim territories. He repopulated abandoned cities and fortresses. He extended the northern borders east and west. His army became more organized, his strategy more sophisticated. He transformed a mountain refuge into a resilient kingdom. The Frankish kings Pepe and Charlemagne also became part of the story. They crossed the Pyrenees, establishing buffer zones against Al-Andalus. They fortified cities and supported rebellions. The northern Christian kingdoms were not alone. They were part of a network of resistance that began to challenge Umayyad power. Systematically, while the south enjoyed wealth and stability, the north became a laboratory of strategy, persistence, and faith. By the second half of the 9th century, internal conflicts weakened Al-Andalus. Rebellions erupted. Dissension spread through the ranks. Ordono I and Alfonso Roman III took advantage of the chaos. They launched raids and sieges. They coordinated with rebel groups. The Asturian army struck at the right moment at the right place. The Umayyad commanders were forced to divide their forces. Musa ibn Musa and his allies were repeatedly surprised by the speed and cunning of the Christian armies. Fortresses fell. Rebels were supported. Territories once thought lost became contested again. The Battle of Mount Laturce became a symbol of this era. The Christian kings used terrain and strategy to compensate for smaller numbers. They coordinated ambushes. They struck swiftly and withdrew. They used rivers, forests, and mountains to their advantage. Musa ibn Musa himself was wounded and forced to retreat. The Asturians pursued relentlessly. The battle demonstrated that disciplined strategy and intimate knowledge of the land could defy even the mightiest forces. Alfonso Roman III the Great continued this legacy. He expanded into the Douro River Valley, repopulated cities, secured territories, allied with rebels inside Al-Andalus. He established the framework for what would become a long-sustained struggle. This was not just war. It was a battle of cultures, faiths, and identities. It was a contest over the very soul of the Iberian Peninsula. By 878, the Umayyads attempted to respond. They sent multiple armies under several commanders. Each column met with disaster. Ambushes set by Alfonso Roman III and his allies tore through their ranks. Even when numerically superior, they could not overcome the tactics of the defenders. The valley of Valdemoro became the stage of a decisive pursuit. The fleeing Andalusian army left most of its men behind. The Christian forces emerged stronger, their morale unbroken, their legend growing. The victories of Alfonso Roman III and his predecessors laid the foundation for centuries of struggle. They proved that the mountains of the north were more than a refuge. They were a crucible of resistance, a place where strategy, courage, and faith merged into action, where men like Pelagius and Alfonso turned survival into the possibility of conquest, where the beginning of Reconquista was written not in grand palaces but in the rocks, forests, and rivers of Asturias. The Christian kings learned the value of alliances, of timing, of terrain, of patience. They knew that defeating Al-Andalus required more than battles, it required endurance. The war would be long, it would test generations, but the spark ignited at Covadonga would not die. It became the light that guided armies through centuries of struggle, a reminder that even the smallest resistance can shape the fate of nations. Following the victories of Alfonso Roman III the Great, the northern Christian kingdoms began to consolidate their hold on previously contested lands. The Douro River Valley became a strategic frontier where fortresses and settlements were strengthened and repopulated with loyal subjects. Every town, every village served as both a defensive outpost and a hub for cultural and economic revival. The Asturian kingdom now stretched its influence across Galicia, Leon, and Cantabria, while small pockets of Muslim resistance still lingered in the central mountains. The rulers understood that permanent security would require not just military victories, but the ability to govern effectively and maintain alliances with local leaders. Both fear and respect became tools to manage newly acquired territories. Alfonso Roman III's successors faced challenges of succession and internal strife, but the momentum of the Reconquista continued. The Christian kings learned from the battles of the past, understanding that the Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba remained a powerful adversary, and that the struggle for Iberia would be defined as much by strategy as by faith. The northern kingdoms relied heavily on mobility and local knowledge, their armies often outnumbered but more disciplined and capable of rapid ambushes. Muslims still controlled the wealthier regions of Andalusia, their cities thriving centers of trade, culture, and scholarship, but they were increasingly forced to devote resources to defend against repeated raids and incursions from the north. As the 9th and 10th centuries progressed, the northern Christian kingdoms became more sophisticated in their military tactics. They learned to combine infantry with light cavalry raiders who could strike deep into enemy territory and withdraw before reinforcements could arrive. Intelligence gathering, scouting, and careful observation of enemy movement became essential skills for commanders. The Umayyad governors attempted to counter these tactics by fortifying their northern frontiers, creating watchtowers and garrisons. But the rugged terrain favored the defenders, who knew every pass, ridge, and river crossing. The element of surprise remained a decisive factor in nearly every engagement during this time. A new wave of heroes began to emerge, figures whose deeds would be immortalized in songs, poems, and chronicles. Among them were counts and lesser kings who carried out raids across Muslim-held territories. They recovered fortresses, repopulated abandoned lands, and strengthened the northern economy. Every campaign was both a military operation and a demonstration of Christian dominance. Each success inspired further rebellion in Al-Andalus and further cooperation among Christian states. The shared goal of pushing the boundaries of Islam in Iberia fostered alliances and rivalries alike. By the 11th century, the fragmentation of Al-Andalus into smaller Taifa kingdoms presented new opportunities for Christian rulers. The central authority of the Umayyad Caliphate had weakened following internal strife, civil wars, and succession disputes. The Christian kings exploited these weaknesses, launching coordinated campaigns against isolated towns and fortresses that were often ill-prepared for sustained siege warfare. The Reconquista accelerated as northern armies gained confidence and experience. Each victory provided resources, manpower, and strategic positions for the next operation. The north was no longer just defensive mountains, it had become a launch pad for expansion. It was during this period that the legend of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar began to take shape. He would later be known as El Cid Campeador, a name that evoked both respect and fear across Iberia. Rodrigo was born into a minor noble family near Burgos, yet his martial skills, intelligence, and leadership would propel him to the forefront of the Christian campaigns against the Muslims. He served both Christian and Muslim rulers at different times, demonstrating the complex political landscape of Iberia, where alliances were often pragmatic rather than strictly religious. His campaigns combined strategic brilliance with personal courage, and his ability to inspire loyalty in his troops was unmatched. El Cid's early military career was defined by raids and skirmishes in Castile and Valencia regions. He demonstrated an exceptional ability to read the terrain, anticipate enemy movements, and exploit weaknesses in fortifications. His victories were often decisive, turning small forces into overwhelming threats through speed, cunning, and surprise. Each conquest not only expanded Christian territory, but also secured critical trade routes and fortified key cities. The consolidation of these territories laid the groundwork for sustained campaigns further south, where the wealthiest cities of Al-Andalus awaited conquest. Meanwhile, the northern Christian kingdom continued to evolve politically and militarily. They established fortified cities and administrative centers to maintain control over newly conquered lands. They encouraged settlement in abandoned towns and provided incentives for farmers and tradespeople to relocate. The economy of the north gradually shifted from subsistence to a more organized structure capable of supporting professional armies. The synergy between military expansion and domestic governance became a hallmark of successful northern rulers during El Cid's rise. The Taifa kingdoms of Al-Andalus were fragmented, and politically unstable rivalries among Muslim leaders allowed Christian armies to negotiate temporary alliances with certain factions to defeat common enemies. This complex diplomacy required skillful negotiation, as well as battlefield prowess. Rodrigo Diaz navigated these waters masterfully, sometimes serving as a mercenary commander for Muslim rulers while remaining a symbol of Christian resistance. His dual role illustrates the pragmatic and fluid nature of Iberian politics, where religion was intertwined with survival strategy and ambition. By the time Rodrigo earned the title of Campeador, he had secured victories in multiple campaigns across Castile, Aragon, and Valencia. His reputation as a brilliant tactician and fearless warrior spread throughout Iberia. The Christian kingdoms began to see him not just as a soldier, but as a strategic asset capable of leading large-scale operations that could change the course of the Reconquista. His leadership demonstrated the importance of experienced commanders who could adapt to diverse conditions, from mountainous terrain to open plains, from sieges to cavalry engagements. The campaigns of El Cid were characterized by careful planning, meticulous reconnaissance, and decisive execution. He combined traditional siege techniques with innovative strategies such as feigned retreats and ambushes. His understanding of enemy psychology allowed him to manipulate opponents and create opportunities for decisive victories. Every campaign reinforced his legend and inspired further support from both soldiers and local populations. His ability to maintain discipline and morale under harsh conditions made him an invaluable leader and a symbol of Christian resilience. As El Cid consolidated control over key territories in Valencia, he established administrative structures that ensured stability and prosperity. His governance balanced strict military discipline with fair treatment of civilians, creating a model that encouraged loyalty and productivity. His cities became centers of commerce and culture while remaining defensible against enemy raids. The success of these policies demonstrated that the Reconquista was not solely about battlefield victories, but also about effective governance and integration of conquered populations. By the end of this period, the foundations for further Christian expansion were firmly in place. The northern kingdoms had secured strategic strongholds, reclaimed key cities, and developed capable armies under skilled commanders like El Cid. The Muslim territories were fragmented, vulnerable, and often preoccupied with internal conflicts. The stage was set for successive campaigns that would continue for centuries, shaping the destiny of the Iberian Peninsula. The legacy of the early Reconquista leaders combined military skill, strategic insight, and political acumen into a continuum that defined the medieval struggle for Spain. The story of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, the rise of Christian kingdoms, and the fragmentation of Al-Andalus illustrates the complexity, determination, and resilience that characterized this era. The Reconquista was not a single battle, but a centuries-long campaign shaped by geography, politics, leadership, and faith. Every mountain pass, every fortress, every river and city played a role in the unfolding drama. It was a struggle that required vision, courage, and perseverance from generations of rulers, commanders, and soldiers, whose actions would echo through history, inspiring chronicles, songs, and legends for centuries to come. And so the centuries-long struggle for the Iberian Peninsula stands as a testament to human courage, resilience, and vision. The Reconquista was not merely a series of battles, it was a saga of leaders, warriors, and ordinary people who dared to dream of a land united under their values. Every mountain pass, every fortress, every river witnessed the clash of empires, the ebb and flow of conquest and retreat, and the forging of legends from the fires of conflict. From the determined stand at Covadonga to the rise of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, the Campeador, every victory and setback shaped the destiny of generations. This is the story of perseverance against overwhelming odds of strategy, intellect, and faith, intertwined of the relentless pursuit of a vision that seemed impossible, yet was realized through unity, resolve, and unwavering courage. The echoes of these struggles continue to resonate, reminding us that history is never written by chance, but by those brave enough to seize their moment and change the course of the world forever.